The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Charles Angelo Savarin, President of the Commonwealth of Dominica. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Charles Angelo Savarin, President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Tijani Mohamed Bande, the Secretary General to the United Nations, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, distinguished heads of delegations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Madam President, I wish first of all to extend sincere congratulations to you, that is to say, President Bande, on his appointment, and extend best wishes for a successful, satisfying, and productive tenure. We live at a critical and defining moment in the history of our planet, and decisions and commitments made under your chairmanship will be as important as any made before in determining our collective stewardship of the planet and the quality of life of all for whom it is home. Madam President, my delegation and I also recognize and congratulate our fellow CARICOM sister state, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for its election as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the period 2020-2022. As the smallest nation state to accomplish this historic feat, St. Vincent and the Grenadines gives assurance to all small states that they too can sit as equals among the much larger, richer, and more powerful member states, and that their voices be heard on matters affecting global interests and security. I extend warmest congratulations and greetings to you all from the grateful people of the Commonwealth of Dominica. We are profoundly thankful for all the attention and support from this body, its member states and specialized agencies in the aftermath of the massive devastation inflicted on us by Hurricane Maria in September of 2017. 2 years ago, when Dominica lay in ruins after being ravaged by the Category 5 Hurricane Maria, our Prime Minister, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit, stood at this rostrum a mere 5 days later to address this august body. Prime Minister Skerrit indicated then his resolve to set Dominica on a path to become the first climate-resilient nation of the world. Our Climate Resilience Recovery Plan is nearing completion, and our new implementation agency is fully operational, and the resilience building work has begun. Thousands of homes have been repaired and rebuilt, and hundreds more contracted to be built. New resilient housing units are being constructed all over the island. Public utilities have all been restored. All children are back in school as of January 2018, although some schools remain to be rebuilt. The road network has been vastly improved, and most of the damaged or destroyed bridges have been repaired or are being rebuilt to higher standards. The rivers and watercourses have been dredged, and the greenery has returned to the hills, the valleys, and mountains. Practically everyone visiting Dominica in recent times has described the transformation of the country after Maria as miraculous, and indeed it is. We acknowledge that we have not done it alone. We are doing it together. You, the global community, including non-governmental organizations and faith-based organizations, many of whom are still dutifully at work in Dominica as I speak, are playing your part. All of Dominica says thanks, and we recognize that we owe you an everlasting debt of gratitude. We also hasten to say that the task is far from complete. Building resilience is a momentous and expensive task. One of the deficiencies of the international system is a long gestation period between pledges and commitments and the delivery on those premises. We urge those of you who have pledged to support us in creating this new climate-resilient nation to deliver. Time is of the essence. Madam President, we meet more and more evidence. As we meet, more and more evidence is emerging that a new chapter is being written by the forces of nature, and the evidence is right before our eyes. This chapter speaks to the catastrophic impacts of climate change, and as we deliberate this week, many countries are reeling under its devastating effects. For many island states, and particularly so for the smallest ones, the message being sent is that rising sea levels, violent tropical storms and hurricanes, periods of severe drought alternating with floods and forest fires, new plant diseases, vector-borne diseases such as chikungunya and Zika present an existential threat. The time for action is now. Madam President, competent scientific authorities are now advising that the rate of global warming is proceeding faster than was originally believed. The impacts of climate change are cross-cutting, affecting every sector and every facet of life on Earth. Notwithstanding commitments made to take action to slow the rate of global warming, too many countries continue to pursue the same policies which are contributing to nature's angry response to our overindulgence and reckless exploitation of our planet's resources. If the devastating impacts of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017 did not convince us, we can look to the calamity of Hurricane Dorian in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas just a few weeks ago. Madam President, Dominica stands in solidarity with the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama, two island communities of the Bahamas archipelago whose lives and livelihoods have been devastated by the destructive forces of the Category 5 Hurricane Dorian, which inflicted total destruction and considerable loss of life. As the experts have predicted, these tropical storms are becoming more frequent and more intense with rising sea temperatures. What they did not predict is that a storm of such ferocity could virtually sit over an island for some 40 hours, wreaking incalculable havoc. We are left with no choice but to accept that Category 5 hurricanes may become the new norm. There is need, therefore, for us to go back to the drawing board in order to reassess national approaches to risk mitigation and disaster preparedness. But it is not only in small island states that climate change is having an impact. There are heart-wrenching reports and disturbing images of flooded cities and severe droughts that are driving millions from their traditional homes and occupation. The result is homelessness, starvation, and mental anguish. Soon, the phenomenon of climate refugees will also become a new norm. And then, President, there are forest fires not only in Brazil and the Amazon, but here in the United States, in Europe, in the Far East. When fire strikes your neighborhood, President, you do not hold a meeting to determine if your neighbors are insured. You call out the fire brigade. And this is what we need now, urgent action. Our planet is on fire, and we must take immediate steps to quell it. So, President, Dominica reaffirms its commitment to the Paris Climate Accord, and again pleads for release of the resources pledged to implement actions designed to reduce risks and mitigate the impacts of climate change. We applaud the leadership shown by the United Kingdom government in assisting countries like Dominica to build greater resilience against the effects of climate change. We thank those nations who have recently committed to double their pledges and increase resources to the Green Climate Fund, and to make further resources available to small island developing states to help us adapt and mitigate against the effects of climate change. However, the issue of accessibility and timely disbursement of funds must be addressed if the urgency of our needs are to be met. In pursuit of the vision to become the world's first climate-resilient nation, we have prepared a National Resilience Development Strategy. The NDRDs is a broad framework which provides a roadmap and guidelines for taking the country to climate resilience by 2030. Detailed targets and plans to achieve them are articulated in greater detail and precision in sector strategies. It is a live document which will be adjusted and updated every 4 years based on annual monitoring and evaluation exercises and data emerging from new studies and surveys. Following Hurricane Maria, which caused damage and loss estimated at 226% of our gross domestic product, great urgency was given to rebuilding the country and to build back better. However, experience has taught us that a new approach to project management and implementation had to be adopted if intended targets were to be met in a timely manner. To assist in overcoming this potential challenge, the government established by statute the Climate Resilience Act No. 16 of 2018 established the Climate Resilient Executing Agency for Dominica, the CREAD, to develop a climate resilient and recovery plan, coordinate reconstruction work, and facilitate the smooth and efficient implementation of projects. Mr. President, my government is most appreciative of the support provided by our bilateral partners who have worked with us in setting up the CREAD, and we are especially grateful to the British government operating through the Department of International Development, DFID, to Canada and the World Bank for their support in its establishment and operation. Dominica, by any measure, is an insignificant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Notwithstanding this, we believe our actions must match the spirit of the climate conventions we have signed. We have therefore developed a low-carbon climate-resilient development strategy. The strategy emphasizes the development and use of renewable energy to fuel our development and as a means of earning export revenue. A recently completed Resilient Sustainable Energy Plan confirms that Dominica is in a position to generate approximately 90% of the country's electricity needs using renewable sources, primarily geothermal, by 2029. Realize a reduction in the annual cost and volume of diesel fuel used for electricity generation by 94% and reduce the total cost to generate electricity between 2020 and 2038 by at least 44%. Serious initiatives to exploit the country's geothermal potential commenced in 2008 with financial support coming mainly from the European Union and the government of France. Following extensive geothermal exploration, it was confirmed in 2012 that the reservoir in the Rosa Valley, which was subject of exploration, had a potential of 120 megawatts, and this would not only satisfy domestic needs, but could potentially produce electricity for export to the neighboring French islands of Martinique and Guadeloupe, thus reducing their own carbon footprint. Madam President, this painstaking work, conducted over 6 years, speaks to the arduous task of developing the renewable source such as geothermal in order to reduce the associated risk and cause a bankable project to emerge. Notwithstanding fiscal challenges along the way, government stuck to its commitment to provide initial funding for the project. As the project stands today, a financing package totaling $27 million has been signed with the World Bank for the construction of an initial 7-megawatt geothermal plant. Construction will most likely begin early in the new year. Mr. President, Dominica, as are all CARICOM countries, is committed to the principle of preserving the Caribbean as a zone of peace. It is inevitable that from time to time, differences will arise between and among various interest groups within a state. While we are always available to act as mediators in resolving internal conflicts, we believe in and will forever adhere to the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. We hold this to be a universal principle, not one to be selectively employed and discarded where ideological differences arise. Wherever there are uneasy tensions among states and differences in interpretation of the Constitution within a state that trigger civil unrest, we call for restraint and for resorting to the table of negotiations and dialogue to resolve such differences. The other options only serve to prolong and intensify human misery and suffering and violate the principles on which this august body was founded. Mr. President, the climate is at war with our member states. Let us not aggravate the situation by creating hostility and war among ourselves, particularly in this hemisphere. We support the One China policy and call for dialogue to achieve the peaceful reunification of China. We support dialogue and negotiations to bring about the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We support dialogue and negotiations to resolve the disputes in the Middle East, including the possibility of a nuclear arms race. We again call for an end to the unjustified, continued economic blockade against Cuba, so as to free up the vast potential of the Cuban people to take up their rightful role in the global economic and trading system. We also call for an end to the unilateral sanctions imposed against Venezuela, which we believe is serving no useful purpose and which rather serves to cause misery and suffering to the Venezuelan people. We continue to call for dialogue and for countries to support the peaceful mediation amongst disputing parties within Venezuela to achieve an outcome that will serve the best interest of all Venezuelans. Let us all adhere to the provisions of Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, particularly in this hemisphere where we should aspire to become a zone of peace and development. I thank you, Madam President.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state.